Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Second Act Actors. I'm your host, Dr. Janet McMorty, and I'm still a medical doctor simultaneously trying to pursue a career in acting. I'm also the very proud owner of a restricted and non-restricted firearms license, given to me by this man. My guest this week is Dan Levinson, the owner, founder, beer of all things at Rapier Wit. Now, Rapier Wit is the kind of foremost, preeminent, everyone knows about it, fight school in Toronto. Dan is a fight director. He has probably the coolest place to work ever. If you've ever been to Rapier Wit, it's right now under renovations, which is very exciting. But if you've ever trained at Rapier Wit or been to Rapier Wit, it is probably the most friendly, welcoming, exciting place to be. I mean, you walk in and there's all this like cool stuff on the walls, including lots of chairs that they use for combat. And then if you keep walking, there's the armory in the back, and you walk in and there's just every single weapon you can possibly think of. And let me tell you, the people who work there are the most enthusiastic human beings about the history of weaponry, of gun handling, of the weapons used in movies I've ever met. You'll hear me talk about this in our interview, but I remember doing a class at Rapier Wit, and it was a movement in the firearms and movement for the performer class where you learn how to handle firearms as an actor. And I remember just being so enthralled by the stories that Dan was telling us about, you know, which guns are used in which movie and why and blah, blah, blah. And I was just, oh my God, this is the most fascinating thing ever. I'm nerding out like crazy. My brain is exploding. And he pulled me aside and he goes, what do you want out of this? Like, what do you want out of this class? Because because Dan is just the greatest person on the planet. I want to help you achieve your goals. And I'm just a bit confused about what you are wanting out of this. And I was like, I honestly don't have an answer for you. And you'll hear me in this interview. I still don't have an answer. I don't know. Am I ever going to be some great stunt performer? Wouldn't that be incredible? I would love that. But honestly, what I was hoping to get out of that class, and what I will be hoping to get out of every class I take there from now on, is just absolute joy and love of stage combat. And that is what I got. Who knows if I'll ever work in stage combat, but just being around these human beings and their enthusiasm for what they do was just what I was craving. And boy, howdy did I get it. I am rambling on this introduction, but I just think Dan is one of the coolest, nicest, most encouraging human beings on this planet. If you are ever in the Toronto area and you want to take a stage combat class, or just learn how to move as an actor, or learn how to handle weapons, or just be around enthusiastic human beings, I highly, highly recommend Rapier Wit. Like, there are no words. It is the most fun I've ever had. Now I'm done rambling. You will see in about T-minus 5 seconds why this man is one of the coolest human beings I've ever met. Please enjoy Rapier Wit's Dan Levinson.
That's right.
Out of the human things now. Yeah, right. Just walk normally. What?
Oh, I have stories.
Yeah.
Well, and let's be honest, because this is an important thing to share. COVID has either deprogrammed or programmed us to forget how to human.
Ooh, interesting.
Right? So I'm running into people who I've known for years, and you go, hey, and you're like, so I've now taken on to, may I, for the hug, right? And the other thing I've noticed is, where do people's eyes go?
Ooh, interesting.
So I have a fantastically talented, excellent friend who also does fights, who I helped get started, and he's his own person now, and Nate. And Nate has one eye, he has the tissues, but it doesn't function. It doesn't see out of it. And I realize, when I talk to people, I look in their right eye. So when I talk to Nate, I need to switch to his left, because you're looking for cues that you're being understood.
Yeah.
Like literally right now, I just saw your eye go "Ooh," as you're like working through your processing, right? And going back to the deprogramming, I'm having some people where I don't know if they're following me, if they don't make eye contact, which sounds very one way of communicating, but there's certain things, right? Like you. So we've peppered my speech with. Does that make sense, or do you understand? Do you know what I mean? I always did, because you're doing all sorts of physical stuff in stage combat, and sometimes it moves pretty quickly. But I've noticed I'm using it more in common speech, because I'm not always sure people are listening to me, because there's, let's say we're outside, there's so much interesting input that they're like looking all over the places I'm talking to them, which I'm as guilty of as well. I don't want to make it sound like I have not also when we're on the outside now, as you're looking around.
It's so interesting to think about, because you kind of wonder, is this the new normal, right? Is this how we will be, and then will we slowly phase out the need to be like, do you understand? Because the new normal will be, squirrel.
But I do have an answer about that. Everything's always the new norm. So, obviously, I'm here to answer your questions, but I want to ask you a question, because I've always wanted to ask this question. So you put in think of all the time and effort you put into become a doctor, right? And for, I would say, the majority of Canadians, or just people, they've never understood that amount of focus and need. Not that they haven't done difficult things, but it's on a higher amount. And so I joke about going to theater boot camp, where my roommate in first year university was in it is just general arts, and he partied I don't know when he went to class, where I had like 12-hour days, right? And so with your reaching the level of whatever you have decided, yes, now I'm a doctor, if you know what I mean, right? And I might be touching on that imposter syndrome that we all share as artists as well. Did you suddenly feel, because we're talking again about the programming, did you suddenly feel like you were sort of a stranger in a strange land sometimes among normies?
Yeah, and I it's hard for me to think about, I can definitely tell you there was a time when I realized that I know things. And I'm now, I work in a specialty, so I'm being referred patients by other physicians for answers to a question they have, saying, I need your expertise. Can you help me with this patient? And I'm like, oh, beginning I was like, what? Okay. It's that whole joke of I'm looking around for the adult to your adult, realizing I'm the adult. But there was a definite moment, and I remember being told this in medicine, that you will get there. When you kind of go, I don't think so. When you're kind of looking around going, oh, nothing shocks me anymore.
Really?
Yeah, there are things that you're like, I don't know if I know the answer to that, but even that feeling doesn't shock me anymore, because I know now what to do when that happens, what to do with the unknown, what to do when you're in an emergency situation, because you're like, no, nothing is surprising, because I've done the shocking things. You can't get much worse than what I did in training, which
right.
I think is the reason for training.
Yes. So if I could, I'm going to run with that. The equivalent on my side, I'm going to call it the creative bump. So one of the things I hope I'm very good at, and one of the reasons why I think people hire me and use me as a director, not just as an instructor, is that I think of the things they don't think of and offer the creative bumps that give them a new path to explore without having to spoon feed and create everything, right? And that thing you're describing, we haven't thought of this yet. And I'm able to either have internally the prompt or offer the prompt to get forward. Where I would suggest, when I was new to the profession, I might have this mad, creative, explosive idea, but I didn't know where to go necessarily. Where now I think I can be purposeful in what to do. And the other thing about it, and I bet you will agree on this, is you've given yourself permission to be wrong.
Yes.
So we joke least my generation joked about the lies my fight master told me, and I think there was a thing where it was very hard to admit if you were a senior and a person of authority to admit lack of knowledge or being wrong. And I distinctly remember hitting on that idea that, I don't know, let me find that out for you as one of the things. Because I really like studying and looking into new things. Or, much more important, because usually we're talking a rehearsal time where it's short time, it's trying something and going, thank you, you did exactly what I asked. It wasn't a great choice. That's on me. Let's try something new. Rather than you did it wrong, right? It's not that at all. And as a director, not just a fight director, but as a director, what I like to do is so Janet just did a fantastic pass of the scene. I loved it. Let's make sure it is in fact repeatable, but also the right choice. I'm not saying it wasn't fantastic. Would you, though, try this? And we're going to see if it's still the right choice. So maybe a micro or kind of a macro change. And I try to, and I explain this to my actors that how do you know you're there? Going back to what you were saying, I'm there, right? And I think a danger that we run into about A, not being able to admit that we're wrong, or B, in the rough, like digging down and going after the same choice when it's not the right one, because you don't suddenly have a feeling like you can afford the time or you can't think of another choice. So that's where I hope my creative bump comes in. But the last thing I think is when I talked about the new normal, knowing that everything is the now. And so I was really fortunate. I just worked on a show where I walked out feeling like I really was helping, and I really gave some great material, and people, there was a good feeling when you leave the room, and people felt high. And I wish I could say that was all the time. Okay, I'm going to say it. It's all the time because I'm that good, right? But no, occasionally you leave and you're like, it was good, but you felt kind of workmanlike. The difference between being an artist and, an artisan or a work person is that, you just, like, where's your level of sense of ownership or perhaps authenticity to yourself, or, which sounds kind of over the top, I suppose. But they're precious moments when you feel internally you're on the right path. And I want to give that to my actors, and that's why give them new comparisons or try new things in the scene so that they feel the rightness, not just from the external of the director saying yes. And so we do that a lot. Now, some things you can't. So obviously the danger of a blade moving through space, you don't want to have last-minute improvisational ideas, because that's obviously not what we do. But there's moments of break where you can say, let's try this instead, where everyone's on page. Do you know what I mean? And so when I said it's the new normal, the only thing I can promise all of us is change. And again, because I'm so fascinated by medicine and by your experience of straddling two worlds like a god, both medicine and art. You're also constantly being asked to accept change, because I can only assume day one of medical school for you, what might have been just an absolute, everyone was sure of, is now, we're not so sure now. So my wife Kirsten is super interested in everything, and medicine is a major everything. And the idea of gut health being also part of your mind, and how there's a connection. And we weren't talking about that in the 80s or the 90s, or at least not in the open world, right? And now it's like, hey, this is a big deal, and let's start talking about it. So you as a doctor, because people want science to be set in stone, and, we're solved. It's like engineering, right? Like, we know these laws, and now we don't have to worry about it anymore, which we do call it the art of medicine, right? Practicing medicine.
It's that's exactly what I was thinking, right? I love the fact that it's called a medical practice. And I think the scariest doctors are the ones who can't admit when they're wrong, or are unwilling to listen to anyone else around them, especially those in the lower in the invisible hierarchy of medicine, right? And we see that a lot with, like, airplane pilots, like not listening to the, second in command because they're a bit lower than them in seniority, right? Like, those are the scary doctors who are so set in their ways, and who have forgotten that this is just, we're just practicing.
100%.
And that's the coolest thing about science is that we're learning every day as new technology comes out. Like, even something as simple as, like cigarette smoke. Doctors used to smoke in the delivery rooms, right? Like, there's something as simple as that that's only been a big shift in our global history for the last 50 years.
Yeah.
Maybe a little more now, where now it's like unfathomable. Like, what's going to come in 50 years from now?
Yeah, but like, would you have been one of the 7 doctors who think that this cigarette was the smoothest? Kind of
right?
thing?
It's so interesting, and you kind of go, oh, I don't know. You kind of think, oh, I hope not, but you're like, no.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much influence. But I think the greatest thing about being a scientist is being curious, and that was something I learned from being a kid. I was a kid of scientists who are also artists as well too. But scientists, when things go wrong, they don't stamp their feet, yell and scream at the world, and go pout in a corner. They go, ooh, why didn't my experiment go right? Ooh, let's figure it out and be curious about it. Ooh, why do other people think differently than me? Ooh, that's fun. Let's have a conversation and chat, as opposed to like, I don't want to. It's tough because it's vulnerable, like you said. It's hard to admit when something's gone wrong. But I agree. That was and I'm not perfect at it, of course. We all got egos, but like, that was a shift for me in my medical practice, was when I got to be honest, courage to have a patient in front of me and me go, you know what, exactly what you said, I don't know the answer, let's figure it out. Because, like, find me a patient who would go, wow, I now think you're a stupid doctor.
Yeah.
I have yet to see it. And if my doctor said that to me, my level of respect for them would go through the roof. Yeah. It's a weird mental game we play.
Oh, totally. I'm very fortunate that one of the parts of my life is teaching the next generation of teachers. And Sunday I'm off to Saskatchewan for Fight Directors Canada's national workshop. A little plug, obviously a little late to join now, but we're going to be there for over 3 weeks, and I'm going to be attached to the hip with the next generation teachers, and I take them through all the rooms that all the active combatants are in, and I'll watch them work and talk about what's working for them, and we talk about the students, not in a negative way, but like, what do they need and what are you observing? So we're working on the eye as well as the ear of being the teacher. And the reason why I bring it up, besides the terrible plug of but one of the, I think, the most helpful takeaways I try to offer is super hard. It's remembering what you didn't know. So when you were them, meaning the new person starting this, what can be overwhelming art, right at the beginning, and you have personal ego and concern about, do I know what I'm doing, and will I ever be good at this, and full up front, I grew up being told I wasn't athletic, and I really bought into it, and I was afraid of getting hurt. Like, there was lots of things that held me back, and it wasn't really until university where we, as part of our course load, all had to take stage combat, and I was okay, like. In my class, my friends, there were some friends, my dear friend Simon Fawn, for instance, phenomenal athlete. Just I didn't even feel we were the same species, and yet I persevered, which I hope says something about me. But the thing that I didn't lose was memory that I knew it was hard, and early in my teaching career, teaching teachers. I had some younger teachers than me who were very good athletes who were challenged to think of the people they were building fights for unable to do what they do easily. Thinking, like, I can do this, why can't you do that? A very Canadian approach to things, right? And I had to explain that, well, both of you are very athletic, both of you are about the same height, and the people you're building the fight for, there was one person who was well over 6, like 6'2", 6'3", and partner was like 5-0, you know, and the partner was 5-0 was supposed to do a head kick over the 6-foot person. And I'm like, change the choreo, like you just, but they were when their egos were built into this is good choreo, and it was, but it wasn't for them. Good for them, the participants. So the takeaway for me that I try to reinforce is remembering when you were new and putting yourself in their place. The empathy of what all that entails, right? Because it's hard. And you were saying, when we talk about ego, we work so hard to get where we are, right? And they're, not to argue with you, because I think you're absolutely right, but there is, I feel for the people who don't want to admit mistakes because they may have been raised in a world that to admit mistakes mean you don't deserve to be in the room, don't deserve a voice. Or, more dangerous, is if you admit mistake, then it will be used as a weapon against you for all time. Now, what you said, which I think is absolutely correct, is someone being authentic and forward about, I am going to work this out and figure this out for you, or certainly try, versus I'll let you know and then ghost you or something like that, right? Because I'm hoping that's never happened to you, but I've had people, you know, who let you down, right? So going back to what I'm hoping is valuable and important, not just for teaching, not just for fight directing, but being the artist, the actor of performance, I promise you will be doing things that are new. And you're like, I've been good at this for a long time. Why the hell am I suddenly unable to do what I need my body to do? Or, look at this gray, why am I suddenly finding things harder? You know, I don't wish I was 20 again, in all honesty. My life is immeasurably better now because I'm married to a wonderful person and I have wonderful friends, and I'm very, very pleased and proud of Rapier Wit and the world I've helped create. But I admit there are things that I did when I was 20, like waking up without going my back, getting out of bed, or, you know, there's something to be said, right? But the payoff of getting good at things as you get older, the experience, is that what you talked about, where I now know what to do with this.
And that's such an interesting thought. And I remember it is a privilege, it's a luxury to be able to admit that you don't know something and be safe. Like, what an interesting way to think about it. And I remember having that discussion. I think I was listening to a podcast about something where, yeah, right, about like what a luxury it is and a privilege to have a conversation with someone who disagrees with you and it be a safe space.
Totally.
And like,
Totally.
because if that means like baseline needs are met and you can now be vulnerable in a place. And a lot of people, like you were mentioning, don't have that luxury and privilege. I think that's really powerful. I never really thought about that, again, because I'm coming from a place of immense privilege.
Yeah.
So appreciate that. That's
at risk of making your head expand and make you feel
my favorite thing.
Yeah. I would suggest, you in particular, but people who seem surrounded by a place of safety have created that space. So I remember when I met you, and as I said, I had that lovely feeling of I know this person in a very positive way versus I know this person, you know, and I felt immensely safe being able to just talk to you. Now, it was my place, like it was my space we met in, but you were so open and welcoming to allow me to talk to you that I would suggest that you build the palace of welcoming and people enter it. And we have to work hard to constantly rebuild that foundation when we have authority. But I want to point out to people who are new, you have to do it too. Because, and again, I hope this doesn't ever happen to you, but talking to someone, and you really want to help them. So it's not, at least I really want to help, and I'm not trying to impose an ego. I'm not trying to make them little micro Daniels, But I will admit there are times where I really hold a breath a bit before I give a note or talk to a person who seems so already closed and so ready. The decision's already been made whether they're going to participate or not. Now, it happens infrequently at Rapier Wit because people obviously have gone out of their way to join. And so there's already a choosing, But there are times when I worked in universities for 30 years and not everyone wants to be in your room because they feel uncomfortable in that particular course. And think of all the, like, they're singing and dancing at Sheridan or improv, there's things that just aren't their jam, and I get it. So what I try to do is give everyone as much as they can take in and be comfortable. But every once in a while, I will meet someone who I would think has slightly unrealistic expectations and wish to be treated a very specific way, i.e. lauded for their incredible brilliance, and want a rubber stamp from me. And I can say with great confidence that almost no one I work with, regardless of how technically, artistically superior they are, get a rubber stamp. Right? Because even if they're better than me, which I can promise I've met, there's something I can offer or make them think slightly different about things, and that's like that thing we go to about, like, the creative prompt. But in a place of leadership, being in directing or being a senior actor or being a teacher, when you talked about what's the new normal, one of the things I'm navigating is I've reached also that part of the age where people are looking at me and starting to think, aren't you a little old? Like why should I listen to you? I mean, because I'm creating art. Like, I've created these new things called plays and characters and stories and I mean, like, I've created creation, because that's the youth of us, right? That's what we think of as, like, we invented love when we were younger, and parents didn't love each other. They didn't even know what sex was, right? That kind of thing, And despite the fact that I'm not 20 anymore, I still have that 11-year-old in me who's both small and sad and frightened of the world, but also full of sense of wonder and creativity. I'm worried when the small sad is bigger than the wonder, and therefore because any critique is seen as a personal destructive attack on their ego and soul, rather than today, in the here and the now, maybe you shouldn't thrust at the face. Maybe we should be more careful in our work. Or, as I said to you before, I loved what you did. That was a fantastic run. Let's just try something else to see what we can glean from it. Or we might be wrong. We might be in love with the moment because it felt good now, but is it going to sustain us later in the show?
Yeah.
And then with film, it's even harder because the sustaining us, it's then gone. It's like it's recorded, but with theater, at least, you have beginning, middle, and end constant, right? So it's like running a marathon. You have to start it on the blocks, and you have to get through the tape at the end. Where because in film, we might film it in any orientation at any time, and of course you're doing the same scene over and over again, and you can doubt yourself, was that the right choice? But now I'm fucking stuck with it. Ooh, I said the F word. Now I'm stuck with it because it's recorded forever, and clearly the director kept it.
Is there... I don't know, can you still read?
Pardon? The phone, sorry, let's wait a second.
Okay, so...
Yeah, I'm going to let this go through because probably...
It's the same phone ring that my childhood house had. Now I'm having, like, a moment.
Yeah. And we live in a world now where it's like the phone's ringing. What maniac is calling me?
Oh.
When, of course, I would much rather talk to people than text. Like, texting is like just an affront,
And I'm an elder millennial who's like, If I have to talk on the phone, I have to prep myself for an hour before by like box breathing. If like
As you're taking a Xanax, you know.
I can do this. I can talk on the phone.
That's right. Oh my God, it's like, okay, I have to make this call. I have to go to the bathroom first, though. I need to just make sure I have no downstairs worries. Wait, are my socks matching? I got to get my socks matching if I'm going to make this call. This is an adult call. I'm asking for a mortgage.
Yeah. The ultimate procrastination, right? Like, what can I do to control everything and then just never make the phone call?
So remember all that great stuff I said about you earlier? I love you even more that you're human.
It's funny, I was thinking about that yesterday where I had like 2 things to do after work. And I was like, 2 things is too many. And I went home and I was like, must cancel all plans. I will sit on my couch. I have done the day. I don't know how in my 20s I was able to like have a full course load. Like now I'm like, oh God, I have to get my hair cut and go pick up milk?
Yeah. Now, dare I say, in your 20s, you had that little person on your shoulder with a pitchfork stabbing you in the neck, telling you that you weren't good enough unless you did all this stuff. Now, the person with the pitchfork's still there, but the pitchfork's now a bit dulled, and they're tired. The little person on their shoulder is tired. It's like, you know, come on, Janet, go. And it's like, nah, oh, fuck it. You know?
So I have to ask, because I love asking creatives about how you got to where you are now. Because you went to theater school, yes?
Yes, I went to York University, yeah.
Yeah. When you were growing up, was that something that was encouraged? Like, what was the decision to go into theater school?
So my parents were both were terrific and both very supportive and completely confused by me. I'm the youngest of 3 brothers, and my middle brother is also very artistic. However, went into the business direction, and my oldest brother went into the business direction. And my parents, though philanthropic and very much interested in the arts, like they went to the symphony and they went to theater and they had art. Like I grew up with books and arts. I had a very, very rich art-filled life growing up. However, they were, you know, they quickly realized I wasn't going to be my brother Steve or Mike because I'm very dyslexic. And they didn't know that's what it was, but they knew there was something. Because here I was reading like a fiend. Despite my dyslexia, I was reading, you know, complicated books of science fiction and, you know, like I was reading. But I had all these issues that were manifesting in school. So anyway, long story short, I am in high school. I don't know what I'm going to do, and you're supposed to make a choice. And basically, I auditioned for some theater programs and got into York. And I was like, and I was writing. So I had won a script competition at the National Arts Center, which was really fun. And it's basically some high school students had their shows produced by professional actors. And it was a lot of fun. And I mean, if I looked at the script now, it's like, oh my goodness, right? But it was cool. And so I honestly thought I was going to do some acting, and I was going to do some writing, and that's what I was going to do. So I get at it, and I won't be how many people have you spoken to who went to York University?
Ooh.
And you have to remember, I got out in 91. It's like, I was released from prison. Like, some people really love theater school. I would say, at risk of sounding super negative, I found it very challenging, and many of the ways I work as an artist now are directly affected by what I didn't like then. At risk of sounding like everything is negative. No, but there was a lot of stuff that my wife also went to York. She was a year behind me, and so Kirsten and I had experienced things they weren't nice for us, right? So I'm now graduated out. It's 91. The world seemed to be in a minor recession, and my peers were working, but not as much. And I didn't even have an agent yet, where my entire class was picked up by an agent, which made me feel not great. And there was only 8 of us, by the way. So it's like 150 of us started at York and 8 graduated, which the whole thing, you feel like an elite, but also like you came out of NAM and your entire platoon was killed kind of feeling.
Yeah.
So and this is funny, so the agent who picked up my class kindly contacted me and said, I don't think your future is as an actor. But if you'd like to answer phones for us, I might be able to turn you into a agent. At the time, I'm like, yeah, no, right? Mostly because I had 3 jobs that were taking me through the year, all performing jobs, right? So I thanked them, and I don't think I was rude, but I was like, thanks but no thanks. And what's interesting is almost my entire class was let go within 6 months too. Like it just, like, I perceived it as a huge failure on my part. Later, as I get older, you realize it isn't, right? And I kept doing things that would further my education, further what I was doing. And there was a lot of theater going on in Toronto at the time. And there weren't a lot of fight people. I mean, there were some very talented fight people, but not many. And they were busy in the upper areas, like Mirvish and Stratford. And so I found myself acting in shows with fights in them where people were unhappy, feeling frightened, and I started saying, I could help if you like, and I didn't realize I was good, if that makes sense. It was literally me seeing a problem that needed to be solved, kind of thing. And suddenly, that moment you described, we went, I'm getting calls to do fights, and friends of friends are like, yeah, I heard you're, and clearly what I was getting back was, I like how you make me feel. I love the creativity of the fights. I love the urgency of the fights, and they make a lot of sense. And of course, I'm constantly trying to learn more myself within a very small self-taught world, because there's no internet, and I'm reading what few fight books are out there that are like historical. It was a lot of self-taught. The person who taught us stage combat at York, then with another fight master, started Fight Directors Canada. So now I've been out, and I had started Rapier Wit almost immediately graduating because I didn't want to wait for the phone to ring. But what I was thinking is, Rapier Wit, funny, right? So I was thinking more comedy writing and acting. And I'm starting to do a lot of fight directing, not thinking, and it's interesting because a lot of people do the opposite, like teaching and then fight directing. But where would I teach, right? But I'd be in companies and they'd say, can you show us how to do this? So I found myself starting to teach that way. Does that make sense? Like, okay, here's some stuff you should know so we can get on with the fights. So FDC starts, and my friend Simon and a few of us are asked to join at an advanced level because we're already out in the world being seen and being successful. And so, ironically, they had us do what no one we would never do this now, which was we had to do all these fights that we self-created, wrote our own scenes. It was ridiculous, in all honesty, right? And I would, at risk of sounding, again, elitist and like, I'm so good, but I'm not convinced another group could have done it, because they handpicked the 6 people, and all of us were writers, creators, builders, and we're already working professionally doing this, even if it was in, let's call it Toronto off-Broadway stuff, right? So FDC starts, we're now this advanced acting vets, and more responsibilities being put on us, because there's not many of us. And eventually I got my fight directorship, and there was no teachers yet. Then we realized we really need to make teachers. But I was already teaching at university. So, again, long story short, a dear friend of mine simply couldn't commit to the time and suggested me very kindly. And I went in, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So I created a curriculum of teaching unarmed and sword and maybe staff. So basically that was the basic of Fight Directors Canada. And then drop staff because there's just too much to do in the short period of time they give us at school. And I got better and better with the curriculum, and people liked it. And I was doing the fights in the schools, and the next year it was shared. It was University of Toronto, Mississauga, and it's married to the Sheridan program. And then Sheridan hired me too because they were the kind of the same people at the at the top level running the schools, and they liked what they were seeing. And again, my friend was super busy, and I called to get permission basically because I didn't want to steal his work, and he kindly said go for it. And then I never looked back. So I was there for 30 years, and then with COVID, we had a long discussion about Zoom, and I'm God bless the people who can do things through Zoom. It's not what I do, and it's not really what I was interested in. And also, I was getting resentful driving the same amount of time out to Oakville that I got in class time. And I was doing so much mentoring through the WIT and working with people across Canada and the United States, and I wanted to do more. I was already very busy with WIT. I basically used it as an excuse to pull back. But then, of course, COVID also meant I shut the WIT. But I'm not looking back now. Like it's a relief not to have all the other institutional jobs to juggle. Like I was already doing all this administration at the WIT. I didn't want to do more at the other schools, which sounds really neat, but it's just, God bless them, right? And I guess the irony is the places I used to teach, they don't really teach stage combat anymore. There are people going in, but much smaller. And one of the complaints is stage combat's hard, and it's time consuming, and it's inefficient, meaning, you could have a class of 30 people doing monologues, or a class of 10 people with swords. And if you asked me to describe the world of Rapier Wit, I would say we're a boutique of art. And what I mean by that is not the elitist side of the boutique, it's just a very intimate interaction between people. So you were actually in a very large group when you came in, because I think there was 12 of you, if you know what I mean, right? Whereas, like, we've had lectures where we'd have 20 people talking and stuff like that, but it's really a place for 10 people, right? And using Fight Directors Canada's curriculum as an example, if you want to get your basic certification, that's 90 hours. So 90 hours in unarmed, sword, and staff, those three disciplines together. You don't want 30 people, I would suggest. And when I was in university, working in classes of 20, multiple classes of 16, 16, 16, 16, because that's what one of my days was, I never truly could claim I knew my students well. Whereas at the WIT, I get a very good opportunity to be in the present tense with my students and be who I need to be for them, whereas something has to go when you have a population beyond your capacity to personally work with. And so I started Rapier Wit, it grew and grew and grew, and then in 96, I had that moment you were just describing, and I decided to get my own space because I was using church basement, school, wherever I could find a place, schoolrooms, and I lived in it, 500 square feet, ridiculous, and then I moved to a second place which was like 800 square feet, and then the space as Rapier Wit, I lived above with Kirsten, 1,500 square feet, and that was a major expansion of what I could offer. And so 2003 is where we are now. And I wish I had a really clever soundbite of how I found my way here, but it was a mix of evolution, luck, hard work, and time. And
I think that's an excellent soundbite.
Oh, then please use. But you know what I mean, and this is going to sound like sour grapes, and I apologize if I do, but sometimes you'll meet newer people to the profession who, it's like, you're lucky, you have all this stuff, right? And they don't perceive the effort, time, sacrifices you made. So, like, I never traveled anywhere. Like, everything went into the space, into the WIT, right? I still have challenges. Like, Kirsten wants me to, let's go shopping, get some clothes. I'm like, can I spend the money? And Kirsten's like, damn, we're going to Italy. You need to dress better. She doesn't say it like that, but you know what I mean. And me even going to Italy, it's like, can I take that time? It's like, Daniel, do you want to die and never be anywhere? And I went, is that a threat? But then, but she's right. She's totally right. And it serves me in other ways. Like, it nourishes me with being a human as well as an artist, right? But about the sour grapes, it's and then go back to the other thing I was talking about, where the new normal is where likely when you were in your 20s, we have these perceptions but the internet has altered. I know everyone talks about this, but my sense of the universe is fundamentally different, or was when I was 20, than 20s now. How can it not, right? And my sense of self-importance, I didn't have the ability to post my opinion on all of these feeds and have people read it and then act like it matters. Let me tell you about the war in Ukraine and what I would do. And Kirsten has a fantastic phrase about, let me just get my ass PhD. And all the stuff you've worked so hard, and I do mean you, all the stuff you worked so hard to own and understand, then being told, yeah, but it was easy for you. Or because they're only seeing, the famous, only they're, the back is to the open cave and they're only seeing the back, they're only, because they see that and they perceive that as all, they don't know your whole ball, but you have to know theirs, if you know what I mean, right? And so I am very aware of the hierarchy of power and the truth of having authority and having power. But sometimes you want to remind them, we're still human. And so, for instance, abuse of nurses using medicine again. It's like, what the fuck is wrong with you people abusing nurses? Right? It's like, well, they don't know how I feel. Yeah, I hear you, but do you know what they're going through? Like, I'm sorry you broke your foot. I really do. But you're one of 30 in this room, and we're not sure that guy's coming back. So you'll have to forgive us as we leave you with your foot for now.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, and yeah.
It's funny, I remember reading something one time, or even just like, living on this earth and feeling like as I've gotten older, as we get bolder, we should become better people. We should become more empathetic, more sympathetic, just because as we've witnessed more humanity as we go along our timeline, we should become better people. But obviously not necessarily the case for everybody. And again, we could argue exactly right back to where we started. There is a privilege in becoming a better person when I have a safe space to become a better person and become a more empathetic human being. But I agree with you. I think social media has changed a lot, where now people's opinions are news.
Yes.
Right? Like, they're written as fact in a newspaper.
Exactly.
You're like, oh, this is interesting.
Opinion is fact, yeah.
Opinion is fact now. That wasn't the case before, where somebody's reporting, like, so-and-so wrote this on Twitter, is the headline news. I'm like, what? Interesting.
Yeah. And at risk of sounding right-wing, the whole idea that your emotions are fact. Mm-hmm. Right? So, the painful reality of what we do when we're adjudicating people attempting certification at Fight Directors Canada is sometimes the answer is no, right? Mm-hmm. So the outcomes that are possible from all the training is obviously you pass and are certified. You can be so good that we pass you with distinction, which means we really recognize the exceptional work you have done. This, no surprise, doesn't happen all the time. In fact, infrequently. Right, because what we're really saying is so for instance, if you pass with distinction at basic, we think you should jump right into intermediate rather than let it percolate, become part of you before you start the next level. We also recognize all of the tremendous work you have done and don't want to make you start from scratch, and that's called passing with conditions, where there's homework, basically, and we're very specific what one needs to do in a specific amount of time, and then at the outcome, a successful outcome of that, then you pass. But then there's the last one that people don't like to hear. Sometimes you don't pass. Now, the irony is my best peers have all failed at something at some point. So here I am, successfully making a living being a fight director, and my first attempt to get my fight directorship at Fight Directors Canada, they failed me, and I had to go back next year. And here I am, I am literally making my living fight directing. And of course, was I happy? I was like, a bunch of old fucks, blah, 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 blah. But when I thought about it and went back and redid it, and I took lessons away. So no one's happy about the failure. But my feelings were facts at that point. And so I've had students who it's like, well, you passed them. Why did you pass me? Well, first of all, you're not the same.
Yeah.
Right? And it's interesting, let's call it specific deafness to notes. And it could be both positive or negative. So you say, you're really improving. Now you need to think about your footwork. They don't hear you really improving. They're hearing, once again, you are garbage. Look at your feet. So that's the negative side of it. The other one is you're really improving. You need to now look at your footwork. What they're hearing is, you are the best fighter I've ever seen. And act better than Olivier. Oh, footwork. So it's a challenge that that we're doing with like that when I meant the specific deafness. And I wish I could tell you with my great experience and sage wisdom of how easily it is to navigate that and help people. It's still, every individual is different. And what I generally start with is acknowledging what they've done and getting them to try to hear that first before explaining why they're not this time getting what they wish. But it's really, and of course it's not just an immediate no. They're also often affected by financial and time, right? Because they put in the time, put in the finance. But we're a professional organization judged by a much larger community, and if we just were a certification factory and you show up and pays your money and here's your certificate, what good are we, right? So I'm always mindful of that too. I have a responsibility for the coming in generation, and you want them better than you were. You don't want them struggling like you did and not knowing what they were doing, like I did, starting having me self-taught.
Yeah, it's interesting about certification. I remember having this discussion with somebody recently. I think it was athletic therapy, who I work with a lot because I do sports medicine, doesn't have a certification process and doesn't have a professional organization, and they're trying to, but there's obviously a fight within saying, no, we don't want to do that. We're already athletic therapists. We don't want to have to certify. But there's a legitimacy to a profession that comes with certification. And of course, inherent in that are tons of issues, of course. But there's a legitimacy to the profession. Like, I have gone through a medical licensing process and testing, and the College of Physicians and Surgeons gave me an expensive piece of paper and was like, you may now do this. There's a legitimacy to that, and I think that is hugely powerful. I think. And you can lobby that.
Yes, and don't you also need to continue to prove your maintenance of those skills?
Yes.
So which we have as well. So there was a time before Fight Directors Canada, and now there's a time after. And agreed, there were people who, and rightly so, there's lots of people who are fight directors not part of our association, but there was concern of, you're trying to take work from us, you want to push us out. And I will admit, when we started, the half of the people who created the organization were less than diplomatic and stepped on some serious feet and didn't go about it in a way that was it was seen as threatening and obnoxious, right? But I think we survived that and grown past it. But there was huge growing pains, and still are, because we're an imperfect growing organization. And the people who started it are now we're older, people are retiring, and so we're losing institutional memory, and so then people have to remake the same mistakes, because they weren't part of the original mistakes. Or I could compare to the newer intimacy directors, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was doing intimacy because there were no intimacy directors. I'm in the room. I'm the person who people feel comfortable doing physical work with them. It never entered my head to say no, because they asked me to. And I'd like to say that I went about it respectfully, but it wasn't structured the way it is now. And so if people ask, I don't think of myself as an intimacy director. If someone asked me to do the work I used to do, in good conscience, I think I still could, and I wouldn't feel like I was creating harm. That being said, I know that there's a whole new world, and as you said, there's legitimacy that can be found from certain organizations, but they too had growing pains. I don't think I'm going out on a limb saying they're continuing to develop and have to work out their path, right? And there's always some interpersonal ego stuff that happens between people who are artistic and have who feel if this is a way to do something versus that's not a way to do something. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that I believe in FDC, and that's why I'm still here. That being said, it's comforting knowing that Rapier Wit is mine. And so if I disagree with something with FDC, I'm not going to go against, because I've agreed this is what certification will be through this organization. But for instance, FDC doesn't do what you did with me with the firearm and the performer movement, doesn't do the PAL firearm certification, and that's all good, right? And I had a mask workshop with Theodore Draganiere where we did fight with mask, and so I can do all sorts of things that aren't part and parcel of FDC, and I feel a growth and healthiness of continuing my work as a developing artist, and not feel like I'm betraying some sort of associational goal. But if I didn't have that, and I was only within the focus of FDC, I might see things differently. Mm-hmm. Right? So your social, social's not the right word because it's much more serious than that. Your clinically professional forces that keep you in your lane preclude you from being, you're not going to talk about psychology or social aspects of health in the same way that someone is part of that association.
Correct, yeah.
And I'm not saying you shouldn't have a voice, but I think we would agree that as you specialize in things, you should also remember you don't know everything about everything. Or the opposite, perhaps people should listen to you, right? So for instance, it still happens where I get a last-minute call. We're doing a show, and we didn't think we needed a fight director. Oh, what are you doing? Romeo and Juliet? And you're like, allow me to help you, right? And it's the sense of the actors will find it and improvise their way through it was also what they were doing with sexual tension and things, like where, okay, I'm going to leave the room. Why don't you kiss for a while, and then we'll come back and do the scene. And it's like, those bad old days were bad, right? First day to get to see each other naked, woohoo, right? I got stories,
I would love to know, as an actor, and again, most of my listeners are actors who are hoping to one day get to work with a fight director. Take me through your process of, you get hired last minute or not for a production, and they go, we need fighting.
That's right. We lost 2 actors already.
Yeah.
This I will answer, but this is an honest to God true story. Years and years and years ago, I show up to do a show. I walk in, and one actor has a black eye, and he's sitting as far as he can from the other actor who's glaring at him. And I'm like, yeah, I think you fucking punched him in the eye for real, for serious, intentionally. Yeah, crazy talk. But so what happens? It depends on the show, but I think sort of trying to make it universal. If the show already has been published, so like Romeo and Juliet, it's a text, regardless of all the creative directions we might go in. We kind of know the show, right? And the decision hopefully has been made. Sometimes I'm the one who shows up and goes, so swords, just because it's kind of like saying food, like we have choices, right? And I will straight up say, I am a snob. I am a prop snob, meaning, and I'm happy you're sitting down because you might faint on this one. Theater has no money. What? Yeah, I know. Meanwhile, all the film people are like, it's like, what? You think film has money? I go, yeah. No. Like, theater sometimes has you pay to be in it. Right? Like, ugh. Anyway, so, what that means is I'm a super fan of, there's no set. Well, you just saw, you were Canadian, Dream in High Park. Right? So there is a set, but it's no set, right? Like the set is the environment, right? So no set, not a lot of costume. You have the one right prop, or in my case, weapon. You know who the person is, where they are, and historically where they are. So I'm a snob. It matters. Because it makes you crazy when it's like, we're doing a World War II thing, and the person comes walking out with like a long sword. Like everything else is World War II, but they have a long sword. I'm like, I'm going to punch you in the throat. Like you're offending me. As a nerd and a geek, Anyway, so we've decided on the rules have decided, and we decided what we're going to be doing weapon-wise. I find out what people's past experience and skill and comfort are, and normally I don't have time to teach, right? Because time, it's like we're doing Romeo and Juliet, 5 hours, kind of thing, crazy talk. So I normally build the fight on my actors. Rather than, I used to have a blueprint. I'd write out all the fight and show up with it. But I kept getting tripped up by life and reality. One, you show up and go, oh, you're left-handed. So that fight's not going to be the same, because it is different if you do right to right versus left to right. Like just how the path of the sword moves in between bodies. You can, but I'm just saying, why mess myself up? I come with ideas, and I know things that need to happen. If it's a well-known script, like I hear Romeo wins the fight. Just saying. It's Thibault's stand. Things like that. So, and you make a face. You would be surprised. There have been times I go, I think you have to lose this one. Just, we got a second act. But I build on the people. What I mean by that is, you move in a certain way. Your sense of center and distance and reach is unique to you. So therefore, I think I'm creating fights that look organic, spontaneous, specific, and you as the actor own it. So we've built the fight. And this may take 1 or 2 rehearsals. I go away, you rehearse it with the fight captain, because very few companies keep me every single day, and there's also other rehearsal aspects that are demanding your time. I come back. We make sure it's still working, meaning that is it still appropriate? Because from other scenes and other parts of the show, this doesn't happen a lot, but it's like we suddenly realized this fight's too mean, or this actor looks too cowardly, this character looks too cowardly, stuff like that. But we basically polish it and make it tighter and better, correct any things that might have technically fallen aside, like they're not hitting the right targets. I go away again, I come back, more polishing. Now I hope we're in costume and with set pieces. And then if I'm super lucky, one more time on the actual stage. That's sort of the universal thing. What frequently I get hired to do, which is super exciting, is we don't have a fight at all. We don't even know the scene. I'm character A, this is character B. We know this is an experience we wish to have the audience have. Knock yourself out. And I'm the authority in the room. I direct, I write, so I have given myself permission to offer these creative suggestions, fully going back to make sure the director is getting their idea that they want and the actors are feeling participatory versus me just stepping on toes, pushing people around. But I really enjoy that because, which is what I just did, I took people who had never experienced stick fighting. A quarterstaff is 6 feet long. They were using something that was more of a walking stick length. And so there's another way you move, but it was very exciting. So I taught 2 actors who had not done that before, and then gave them choreo as character, working with director and actors who are writing the scene as we're doing it.
Huh.
And walking out being told, "You're fantastic," is why I felt particularly good that day. Because what can happen is you totally misunderstood what we're going for. Knock on wood, I seldom hear that. But I think it's because I'm empathetic and I give a lot of space and time to their input versus just like Kirsten has a saying from her experience. She lived in Japan for 5 years, walking in with your shoes on. This is a Japanese experience, you know. And so I try not to do that. At the same time, going way back to our conversation about admitting you're wrong, there's the other side of that too. Coming in with a vocal sense of confidence and authority that gives people the sense of confidence that we're going to go forward and, you know, because I've been in a room where I was waiting for my time to work on a show and the dance choreographer is just finishing some stuff up and they were so unsure of what they wanted, what they were going to do. They felt very soft and weak and you could feel the room worried and frustrated that we were never going to get there. Right? And so there is that balancing act of coming in with a strength and an authority to allow creativity and growth. Because, of course, absolute it's anarchy or it's I'm trying to think of how this is what I'm going to say. So I do something called found weapon fights at the advanced level, which is really exciting because it's basically mundane objects that become a weapon. And we talk about how that becomes part of the weapon. And then you might have multiple things, like a room full of stuff. So having an empty room and saying, go make a fight, is infinitely harder than having an empty room and one chair. Something that anchors you, right? So the minute you have a parameter or an obligation of outcome or anything, a creative prompt I used before, I suddenly can be creative for all day long. But walking into a completely neutral, open, empty room, I will have to create the prompt, otherwise too much can happen. So the dance choreographer I was describing, it's not that they had no ideas, they had too many ideas and didn't know where to begin, and they were way too long in process to be at this state, meaning they brought me in late. This should have been set because they then needed all the rest of the time to own it and be able to perform it consistently. And so when their portion of rehearsal stopped and we had a short break and then I walked in, I saw the room so dejected before it began. The sense of this project's not going to work, we're doomed, like what am I doing here? Like you could just feel it. I was lucky insofar as I knew what I wanted and we did it. And by the time I left, the director said to me they felt an atmospheric change, right? And so the process you asked, you can see is super dependent on who's in the room, the goals. But if, again, looking for the soundbite, I try to come in and find and offer the successful outcomes for the actor playing a character in a specific story, in a specific world for an audience.
How can actors make that job, make your job, those outcomes, how can they make that easier for you?
So I'm going to ask a lot. One, try to say yes. So I've been corrected by newer generations saying consent is very important. And I'm like, yes, consent is very important. And I'm not saying I would ask someone to do something that is inherently dangerous or either emotionally or physically dangerous. What I'm asking is still a lot. I'm asking you for a leap of faith to try something before you judge whether you will like it or not. Because I'm super happy once you've tried it to change it if it isn't right. But taking that first offer and running a bit with it is very important. So improv, I did a lot of improv all through my high school years and through university and stuff. And the only reason why I don't do more improv now is I've been focusing on this. And also I got a little tired of improv, not because improv doesn't deserve 100% focus, because there's obviously Toronto is huge with improv, right? Second City and stuff. But I kept finding myself sort of with the same people you start getting tricks, and finding yourself in patterns. And I was so intrigued by the challenges of stage combat that I simply went in that direction. But the reason why I bring up improv is not that we improvise violence, but improv is full of yes. And letting you, meaning the character, get into trouble. And letting you, the character, suffer for bad choices. An actor once said to me, actually, many actors have said to me at different points, I don't want the audience not to like me, or I'm afraid of looking stupid, or I'm afraid of looking weak, or I'm afraid, And I'm like, I hear you. Be aware the audience will only dislike you if you don't make choices. And if you don't become someone they can see and engage with. So the irony is, a most hateful character who's beloved by the audience is Richard III. And I had a terrible challenge once, years ago, doing Zastrozzi, a rather famous Canadian play with lots of sword fighting in it. And a friend of mine was playing Zastrozzi, and Bernardo and Zastrozzi, Bernardo is he's mentoring Bernardo, and ultimately Bernardo wants to be Zastrozzi. There's a lot of tropes in it about becoming an adult and stuff like that. But the actor playing Bernardo would look to the audience during the sword fight with a face like, I could really take this actor, but I have to do this it's a character thing. Like, he didn't want the audience to think the other actor could beat him in a sword fight. Huh. And I talked to him about it, and he was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And it was so hard for me to get through to him that he would have been better if he embraced the failure the character was suffering. And I have an ongoing joke or comment when I'm teaching choreo and stuff, is we have something I would call orthodox. It's an orthodox movement. Like, everyone does it because it works. Everyone knows it works, and you parry this way. You move across your body. And you can do an unorthodox movement that is weird at the last minute because you have an oh shit moment, and you do something spontaneously and instinctively that isn't an orthodox movement. And I will always punish your character for that. Because you saved yourself for a moment, but you put yourself in a much bigger world of hurt because you did something poorly. And the audience doesn't have our vocabulary of understanding choreo, but they sure recognize someone fucking up. And that's how, if you think about it, all we're doing is a series of accidents, mistakes, poor choices. Because otherwise everything would end perfectly like that. And so, as an audience member, because I'm actually an audience member, I love being an audience member, I resent immensely sterile perfection, and then all of a sudden one character dies. Boom. Wow. No, I want to see one character outfight the other one, either through strength or skill or sneakiness. And I'm with them then. Like, I'm being led along by the hand storytelling. So going back to the question, what can an actor do to make it better? Give yourself permission to be his character in distress. Another thing I tell my actors all the time is the easier it is for the actor, the harder it's going to be for the character and vice versa. So if you do things that are super, 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 super hard, right? Like your choice. So your character surrendering their life to save somebody else is likely a hard choice, but it's a really good, easy choice for the actor because they can embrace it and there's all this stuff to build on. But selfish, neutral, non-offerings as an actor is really easy, right? Because you don't have to, there's no effort on your part. Super hard for the character, right? Because the audience is like, this is like, what do I do with this person? Talking to Janet, the audience, TV, film, theater, doesn't matter. When you're watching something and then you suddenly realize you've been looking around the room thinking, yeah, I should paint that wall, or wondering what you're going to eat next, or whatever, and you realize you completely have left participation, I can promise you what I just described is what happened in front of you.
Huh.
The opposite, where the show's over and you're like, what? How did that happen? How I just sat down. I can promise you they were making decision that made you engage every single step, even if you hated their decisions. Right?
Yeah.
Like, think of the characters you love to hate. Love to hate. It's all about decisions. Whereas characters you're indifferent to, you forget they're even in the show, probably are the other things I'm talking about.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah.
And I get why people do it, because they're afraid to make a wrong choice.
Yeah.
You know? And it's so easy for me to say that any choice is better than no choice. And of course, I'm still talking within the reality of we're using safe technique, but because obviously, like, I just felt like stabbing him in the face. That's not a good choice. And that's not, we're not talking that at all. But honestly, I've never seen someone who made a strong choice regret it when they then continue to make choices. So I made a fucking, like in improv too, I made a terrible choice and the audience is all boo, but they're with you, right? And then you make another choice and you pull it out of the crapper, right? That is the give and take, the contractual relationship we have with our audience.
I love that. Do you have any favorite moments from your career? A moment that sticks out?
It's a hard thing to answer. I would suggest it depends on how I'm feeling at the given moment, right? There's lots of videos of fights I taught for people to learn for their certifications on the Rapier Wit YouTube channel, right? And they're not edited like we're used to watching film. Like it's a locked, it's for adjudicational purposes, so it's a locked shot, and people are like little people running around like this and stuff. But I'll watch some of those and be so proud of what we, as a unit, the director in me, the teacher in me, and watching my performers found. There was moments where, like, I remember when that person was afraid to look another person in the eyes, and now look at them now. Those are examples. I have peers who are just hugely successful in their careers that I had some touch in their lives. And they will like some call me their Canadian father, let's say, or something like that. Like it's incredibly flattering, And I don't really, it's like, no, I think you were there too, right? I think you both, But so sadly, Kirsten and I couldn't have children, and I think I am serving or nourishing that part of me by trying to be the mentor. And Kirsten and I try to help take care of our nieces and nephews, but there's a thing in me. It's my the background of my parents, and of fixing the world, like leaving the world better than you found it, a classic Jewish concept, and of course and I have the Hebrew in my head, and I can't even think of what it is. That's terrible. It'll come to me. But anyway, but there's a saying, right? And I want to say to you, when I got to play this character, it's interesting how when you asked, the image that kept coming to my head was seeing others excel. And seeing others do what they thought they never could do. And the pride I felt for them. And the joy I felt for them. And honestly feeling like I earned my day, which is probably fucking not healthy at all. But that idea that, yet once again, I deserve my place because I have done good.
That got me all emotional.
Oh my God. I can't tell you how much I wish I was there to give you a hug, you know?
Well, it makes me think of when I was in your class, and I remember you asking me, and I'll never forget this, you're basically like, why are you here? But not in a way like, why are you here? What are you hoping to get out of this? But it was, and then the next question to clarify was like, how can we, Rapier Wit, how can I, Dan, how can help you get that? Because I was like in your class being like it's like I want to soak it all up. And it's funny because I still don't have an answer, because my answer is I literally am there to sit and bask in the nerdiness and enthusiasm of the creation of this.
Yeah.
Like there was, sure, would I love to be some like awesome stunt person or be in an action film where I get to be in slow motion fighting? Who wouldn't? But what I loved so much about your classes and loved about the classes that I've taken, like just I think about it now, is the enthusiasm you have for teaching, the encouragement, but also the sheer, I love the history and the honor and the like nerd film, like this is the gun that they use in this film. I was like, oh my God, like more of that, please. You know, like it's funny, like I don't even know how I would write a review of your class to be like, everyone go do this, because I just sat there being like, I don't know what I want out of this, but I know I'm meant to sit here. I love this. And that's exactly what I did.
Bless. Thank you so much. Well, you did the in the class when we did the patrols. You remember the patrols?
Yeah.
And then I layered in events and character structures within the, and I have yet to have someone not participate. If you know what I'm saying. I've had people going, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, right? And of course, many people want me to give them beginning, middle, and end of everything, where I'm like, no, it's cool. We're just trying some stuff out. And then we talk about it afterwards, and how much we talk about how the people outside observing were affected. But interesting how you, as the participant, were affected. And it was interesting, someone said, like I was really stressed about having the command of this unit and this obligation of these people's lives, right? And this other person's like, man, I was so angry when you didn't support that person. And to me, that's a gift, right? Meaning because again, this audience, well, I'll just ask the question, right? Why are we audience? And I would suggest in a world where so much is asked of us to be present tense, to do work, to do, we are tapping down our emotions a lot. And being an audience allows you the emotional freedom for a safe place to feel things. So you're watching something and you're in tears, knowing that a harrowing thing that you experienced just last week, you couldn't give yourself permission to have that emotional connection. But in this safe space, you can feel for this entirely artificial person, this creation. And so as an artist and a creator, I want to give you that as an audience, right? So it's I think our job is actually ridiculously simple, which makes it almost impossible. Our job is, as artists, to give our audience a chance to feel. Now, it could be a simple laugh. That's a good joke, right? It could be a profound change in thinking, oh my God, people who don't look like me or have a different skin tone or whatever, they're people. Or, maybe I'm not the center of the universe. These are profound thoughts you might have. But the other ones are true too, like, oh my God, I was in tears because Old Yeller was shot. It wasn't even a person, it was a dog. And I'm like, but it was a safe place to have emotional experience. So Kirsten took me to see I joke that I used to know happiness, and then I saw this movie, and now I've never been happy since. It's Grave of the Fireflies, and it's an animated movie.
Oh.
Have you seen it?
Yeah,
Right,
that's
yeah.
Studio Ghibli.
Yes.
Yeah.
So now that I no longer am capable of being happy, but just think what that movie did for you. What a gift. And the interesting thing about it is you knew exactly how the movie was going to end within the first few minutes of the movie, and yet you stayed for it.
Yeah.
Right? And so artists, be it visual artists like paintings, music, obviously the movement performances of dance and acting, we're creating a platform, a foundation for our audience to have a safe place to have an emotional stake. And how many times in your personal life you wanted to be empathetic for someone who was going through trouble and you couldn't? You had to protect your own self and ego, because if you sipped from that cup, you would be doomed because of all the shit in your life. But you can do it for the created person.
Yeah.
And for me, that's a fucking important job and gift.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and thank you, Dan, for being my guest this week. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to chat with me, chat philosophy. Oh, everybody, can't you just see why I love him so much? Like, he's just the most enthusiastic human. I just want to be around people like that forever and ever. Like I said in the intro, and I'm going to say it again because they are just that great. If you ever are interested in learning how to move as a performer, how to handle weaponry as a performer, how to, be more enthusiastic as a performer, I highly recommend taking a class at Rapier Wit, taking a class with Dan, just recharge and refuel and re-find that joy that comes with being a performer. Oh, he's just the best. I'll put links in the show notes below for how to find them. Highly recommend. I absolutely have loved every class I've done with him. Go do it. Do it. I hope you will all tune in next week for another episode of Second Act Actors. Bye.